I have a complicated Swedish family in that three siblings married three siblings. So they were very close family, and in fact, they lived close together. Um, these are the great uncles and the great aunts, and three of my father's first cousins, which in genealogy terms for me would be first cousins once removed. And I love this picture because they're in their 30s. I knew them in their 70s and 80s when they would be at the family reunion, sitting in their lawn chairs and speaking Swedish. So it's lovely for me to see them as a young family. So let's begin. Let's get started. Well, how did I get started? And this picture may resonate with some of you. These are the boxes in the garage, the boxes that we put away sometimes after our parents have passed or family members have passed on things to us. And these were sitting in my garage for a while. My mother had always said, "Oh, you will love genealogy. You will love it. It's right up your alley. You're a librarian, you're a storyteller, you're an historian. It has all of those elements." But I was raising a family and working, and although I listened to my mother's stories, I didn't roll up my sleeves and get involved in with her. And I wish I had, because I could have learned so much more. But they say that we go looking for our ancestors and our ancestors find us. And maybe some of you have had that experience where, you're in a cemetery and you can't find that grave, and all of a sudden you trip over the tombstone. I mean, we hear these stories. It's almost as though they are calling to us. Well, this was an experience for me. I opened one of these boxes. It was time to finally tackle it. And on the very top of the box was an article written by a cousin whom I did not know, but I knew my mother corresponded with. She'd written it for a genealogy journal, and it was about my Green family. And I picked it up and read it, and I was hooked. It was almost like my mother had placed it there to tempt me. And I was so intrigued by this family that I had to find out more. So that's how, about 10 years ago, that's how my journey started. So why genealogy? Why do we even get into it? People will say, well, that's the past and we're moving on and whatever. But I think that it's connected to now as well. And I think there's some practical reasons why genealogy is important to us, or family history. Lots of us are seeking answers to family questions. We've heard stories. It isn't clear exactly what happened, but we want to know what this is all about, and we want to find the answer. Some of us may be facing medical situations, and we want to see if it's in our family history. And of course, death certificates give us that information. We can trace some medical conditions. Some would like to find their birth parents. I have an adopted daughter, and I'll share that story with you when we talk about DNA. So some are interested in finding birth parents and answering those questions. Some would like to find proof of paternity. Maybe there's a question of that in the family. Some would like to track land ownership. They've heard that land was owned by a certain section of their family, and they want to go back and document what happened to that land. Some of you may have been with me when we talked about every home has a story and the tracking of land ownership. And sometimes we want to know what happened to the family inheritance that we didn't get. Is there a story there? There may be something that we can uncover. And then some might want to join a lineage society and trace their ancestry for that reason. And that would be the Daughters of the American Revolution, or Sons of the American Revolution, the Sons of the Golden West, the Mayflower Society. But for me, there were almost spiritual reasons for getting into this, philosophical aspects that drew me to this. Well, I should say first that I delight, and many of you may as well, in just becoming a detective. I love to solve mysteries, and I think that's in the librarian's blood. We just want to answer the questions. And we want to discover the secrets of our family that we didn't know about, things that were questions. And I found in the course of the last 10 years that there's something about standing on the land or in the house where your ancestors lived, loved, laughed, cried, perhaps even died. There's just something about doing that, standing there and thinking, my goodness, my great-grandparents plowed this land or lived in this house. And we're curious. Actually, I found that knowing about your ancestor helps us develop our own sense of identity. It explains things about us, or it explains why we are the way we are. And it helps us, I think this is part of our later life chapter too. You know, we're looking back on our lives and trying to put that all together. And our ancestors are a part of that. Also, I've found that by looking at the truth, we're able to heal some of the dysfunction or wounds that we all have in our family in different ways. And we're able to understand a little bit better and perhaps accept and maybe even forgive. And along with that, we develop compassion and understanding. And we understand why our family members lived the life they did. We learn maybe not to judge them quite so harshly or wonder. It's really about developing that compassion and understanding. And we begin to accept that they were people just like us, trying to survive and do the best they could with the life they were given. So all of these things were reasons for me to get into this, and they've proved to be really an important part of my life journey. I follow some different bloggers, genealogy bloggers and podcasters. And one of them that I really like is Roberta Estes. She is a DNA person and her blogs relate to that. But just a couple of days ago, she put this in her blog and I thought, I like this. This is exactly what I think that I've been trying to get at, that genealogy connects our souls. That connection sustains us through tough times, certainly this last year, through pandemics, and bridges death. It connects us through the people we know or knew to the ones we didn't. And that's why genealogists seek ancestors. We carry part of them in us, their DNA, their eyes, their hands perhaps, their smile, and yes, maybe even their souls. And I maybe would use the word spirit too, that we carry their spirit within us. And then this was another quote that I loved. Julianne Mangin was interviewed by Lisa Louise Cook. I am a Lisa Louise Cook fan. She is also a blogger, a podcaster. She has a YouTube channel. Her group is called Genealogy Gems. And I like to listen to her when I take my walks because her podcasts are always amazing. Julianne said, I have been a reluctant genealogist most of my life until I realized genealogy's power to unlock family secrets and make sure of the stories Mom told me about my family. And I think we all can identify with that. But you know, it's not just the stories of our ancestors, it's our stories too. We're part of this story. And the Mitchell Library, my husband is Australian. I've had a privilege to visit Australia several times. And one place I always like to stop by and see is the Mitchell Library. This is the New South Wales State Library, like our California State Library in Sacramento. And it's an amazing library, but as you go in through the pillars into the main lobby, in big letters across the top near the ceiling is all great stories lead back to us. And I think that the great stories of our ancestors lead to us and we lead back to them. So let's begin. Well, it's amazing. Genealogy is a hobby. It's taken off. It is so popular now. It's right up there next to gardening. And that's pretty amazing because gardening has been number one for a long time. I think that the numbers of budding genealogists has grown even further because of the pandemic. And we're all, again, looking at the boxes and thinking, oh my goodness, I really want to do something with my photos and my letters and the things that I have so that I can pass them on or at least organize them so that they won't be thrown out. So it is right up there. And I think that that was really apparent. And I wish I could see all your faces. And I wish I could interact with you as we can in a classroom. But this last weekend, I hope some of you were able to attend this, was an amazing 3-day conference called Roots Tech in Salt Lake City. It was virtual. I have had the privilege of going a number of times. And when it's in person, there are 30,000 people there. It is the largest genealogy conference in the world. But this weekend it was virtual and 500,000 people were registered. Isn't that amazing? 500,000 people, people from 200 countries. It went on for 24 hours, for 3 days, to adjust to different time zones from Australia to Europe, et cetera, Africa, South America. And there were 1,800 classes offered. Now, Roots Tech is going to keep this up for the rest of the year. So this is something you might think of signing up and tapping into some of their classes. So this is what's happening with genealogy. It's exploding. And with DNA, it's exploding even further. Okay, so what are we going to do? What's our journey going to be like? Well, I've divided it into 4 sections, and today I want to touch research and just give you some tools so you can dive in. Now, many of you may be experienced and know about a lot of this, but I'm hoping that I can give you some new ideas and an opportunity to try some different things. Next week, we're going to tackle organization and how we pull this together so that the piles of papers that are on our desks or folders will find some order to it and how it will be ready to pass on to others. The third week, I want to talk about DNA and how that has absolutely changed genealogy and how fascinating that is and how that can really add to our study. And the last week, I want to talk about sharing our ancestor story through books or movies, however we choose to do it, through a website or a blog. And but we'll start with research. Okay, so this is what's called a fan chart. And this is my mother's fan chart. My mother's in the center there. And as you can see, there are her 2 parents. And then there are her 4 grandparents. And then the next circle are the 8 great-grandparents. And then there's 16 great-great-grandparents. And then there's 32 great-great-great-grandparents. As you see, I have a lot of holes now. It goes to 64 and 128 and 256 and on and on. Every one of these people, every one of these ancestors has a story. And we can research or look for any of them, which is pretty exciting. You see, I've done quite a few, or at least I've tried quite a few. I've got my English, my Scottish, my Canadian, but there are holes out there. So not to be overwhelmed, what I would suggest is that you pick the most interesting story that you've heard in your family of someone and go for that. Go for that individual or that couple and focus on that. We'll talk about the low-hanging fruit that will come about as you're doing that research and how you don't want to lose or go down the rabbit hole of something else you find. But it's important to kind of keep on your keep going on the path that you're choosing and then get back to those other things. But we'll talk about how you can organize all that. So 3 of my stories that I have enjoyed researching. One is on the left. That's a church in Sweden, Finneruja, where my family immigrated from. And I had the opportunity to visit that beautiful little church in the area where my great-grandparents were born and lived before they came to America. And their story. And so that is one of my stories that I have enjoyed researching. They were baptized and married, and their parents were baptized and married in this church in the 1800s. The upper right is a farm ranch on the St. Lawrence in Ontario. And this was owned by Loyalist family members who had to flee New York. My fifth great grandfather was hung in his front yard in front of his 6 children and his 32-year-old wife. And she took her 6 children to Lake Champlain and waited for a British steamship. She was in a refugee camp waiting for a British ship to come and take the refugees into Canada. And she settled in Mallory Town along the St. Lawrence. And then I have revolutionary ancestors as well. And the bottom is a house where one of my revolutionary great-grandmothers was raised. It was a museum. I went in, and on the wall was a family tree, and there was her name. And that was a case of ancestors finding me. So I was thrilled to see the house that she lived in as a child. Okay, so now to get started. First, identify the branch or individual that you want to research. And if you know their names or their full names, that's really helpful. And it's really helpful if you know the maiden name, but that can be found. That's not a problem. I mean, that can be found. So you want to know the full names and any dates, birth, marriage, or death dates that you may have. You may not have all of them, but if you have one of those, that helps because that places it in time. And then if you know the location. So 3 things to start with, if you can, are the names, the dates, and the locations. So pick somebody that really interests you, has a good story, and think about it. And then pull together all those things that you have, or at least start to look for them: photos, movies, letters, diaries, journals, memoirs. And if you have these, that's just what a treasure you have. Maybe you have a family Bible. I mean, that is a real treasure. Any physical items like, you know, a hand mirror, a vase, a clock. I have a trunk that belonged to one of my great-grandmothers. And then if you're, you know, reach out to an older relative. We're getting to be the older relatives now, but reach out to an older relative who may have some stories that you don't know about. And then start to organize your information. You know, we're tempted to jump right into that revolutionary patriot and start doing research then and try and connect them to us. It's really better if you start with yourself, because you know all of the information about yourself, and work from yourself back. So begin with yourself and create a timeline for the say you're moving into your parents or your grandparents. Create a timeline for that individual so you can kind of see where the holes are. You may know when they were born or where they were born. You may know when they got married, when they had their first child. Kind of just create that, and it can be informal, but it will help you fill in those holes. And if you haven't already, think about compiling a family tree. And that gives you a visual of where your holes are, the name, the birth, marriage, death dates, and the location. This is a timeline that's in Family Search. We'll talk a little bit about Family Search, which is one of the big 4 databases. But this is a simple timeline. And this is my great-grandfather, Daniel Monroe. I know when he was born. I know when he died, and when he was buried. And that's just the beginning information, and that's plenty to start with. Now, this is a little bit more complex. This is a pedigree chart, a cascading pedigree chart it's called. And again, you can see the holes, but John Reed is my grandfather, and then His parents are Daniel Monroe and Emma Sarah Monroe. And then their parents are here. And then they go to the next generation and the next generation. And it gives you an idea where your holes are. And it's just an overall, it's really nice when you're talking to cousins to kind of put this in perspective where you are in the chart and where they are. This is what I'm going to send to Michelle, that if you don't have a chart already, just use this as she'll attach it when she sends out the recording. Just see if you can fill out some of this. This will get you started. This would be you here, your parents here, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your 2 times great-grandparents. As much as you know, because if you know this, or even this, we can go back to this. You just need a place to start. Now, this is called a family group sheet, and these are able to be generated by software, which we'll talk about next week. Software is a tool that is so helpful. Now, what I've done is just put into my computer program different information I've had, and I've been able to generate a family group sheet. And I've been able to put in pictures. These are my great-grandparents. This is my grandfather, John Reed Monroe, down in the lower corner. And this is really great to send cousins. When cousins are asking about, you don't have to send them a whole family tree, just send them what they're interested in. And you can keep your notes. I like to keep my notes in a timeline format. And I can see where my holes are. Now, I've done a lot of work on Daniel Mosier. He really interests me. He is my Monterey great-grandfather, and who settled in Hollister and was also in Salinas. And he was born in 1838. He was a child during the Mexican War. Notice I've also included, let me go back a bit. I've also included what was happening, like the Civil War. He was a young man during, sorry about that, young man during the Civil War. I've included what was happening in our country, the Enrollment Act of 1863, which was asking all young men to register for the draft. So I've tried to put it in the context, the historical context. But it's just a good way to keep track of all the research that you do. And you can do however you want to do it. But all your notes are in one place. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's get started. I went back to Boston, to the New England History and Genealogy Society, and this librarian was really helpful as we were trying to figure out some relationships during the Revolutionary time. So set a goal, whatever it is, assess what you have, consider new materials, and adjust to the unexpected. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. So here are my great-grandparents. This is Daniel Monroe and his wife, Emma Sarah. And they came to California from Michigan. So let's say my question, it can be very, a small question. My question is, when did they come to California? When did this happen? That would be my goal. My second step would be to see what I have. Well, I happen to have a copy of their marriage certificate. So I know they got married in 1867, and I know they had a child the next year. Probably Emma Sarah's pregnant in this picture. I don't know, but it probably was taken before they left for California. So I can kind of think about when the baby might have been born. I do know that the 1870 census says that they are in San Francisco, but they were married in Michigan. So I've got a 3-year thing in there. I know he graduated from law school in 1867. So that was in Albany, New York. So I know that it's between those 3 years from those sources I have. Now, how can I go to the next step? Well, maybe I can find passenger lists on a steamship, because they had to go over to the East Coast, take a steamship down to the Panama, cross the isthmus. It was a 2-month trip. and then come up the coast to San Francisco. It was before 1860. And remember that Transcontinental Railroad didn't come until 1869. So they had to make the long trip. I could also look up the birth of this child that was born. That might help me. He was in a law firm that he established. I could look in directories to see when the law firm was first established. And I can look in a directory to see what their address is in San Francisco. So those are some things that I could do. But maybe I can't find some of these things. So I've got to sort of think about this again. Maybe I could look at a California census if the other census doesn't work. You just have to shuffle around and you become the detective and you try and fill in the holes. Those who have Southern family members in the Southern states, that's tricky because a lot of courthouses were burned during the Civil War. So a lot of documents have been lost in that way. The 1890 census was lost because of damage. And in 1973, military records were burned in St. Louis in a library there which housed military records. So we have to sort of do the best we can. Sometimes there are holes, but you can see how you become a detective, which fascinates me, which gives me the juice for genealogy. We could be more formal about it, and we could have a research objective. When did my great-grandparents come to California? And I can start to listen different things. And some people like this. I kind of just take notes on a pad, but this is a way of identifying what you have and what you need. Okay, let's look at our sources. This is the fun part. There's two kinds of sources. There are sources which came about at the time the event happened. And that would be maybe a birth certificate, a marriage certificate. Those would be the vital records. A death certificate to some extent, but the informant may have not accurate information because they may not know, they may be there in the house when the person has passed on and they become the informant, but they don't know everything about that person. So there may be some things that are not accurate, but a death certificate generally is considered a primary source. Secondary are compiled sources. Those would be family histories, things that are written after the fact. So these are two sources that we use. Okay, vital records would be primary generally. The census is considered primary and not primary because, again, you could have somebody come to the door and say, oh yes, and answer the questions and not really have all the information. Court records, of course, church records, military records, cemetery records. Cemeteries are so helpful and so great. Just call them, write them. They will send you maps, all kinds of things. I've had very good luck with cemeteries. Immigration records, newspapers, local and general history. That would be secondary. And of course, DNA, which has made changes in all of this. So where are these records? Okay, well, they're online, and they used to say 10% of the records were online. I don't know what it is now. Could be up to 40, 30%, but just recognize that these records have not all been digitized. They are in repositories, museums, libraries, archives, courthouses, churches, cemeteries, historical and genealogical societies. So we can start with the online records and then move to the others. And we can do that in writing letters and in making phone calls, but it's really fun to go visit these places. Okay, so let's look at online resources. Don't forget Google. Google really can be great. It can be a great help. And then there's the big four. Those are the subscription, the ones that cost money, and the ones that are free. Okay, so let's start with Google. Just going to give you a couple of tips. You may know these already, but it really helps with genealogy research. 3 tips. Use quotation marks, include the phrase family history, and use dates. Okay, so let me give you an example here. So I'm researching Nicholas Mosher, one of my people, and he was born in the 1600s. And I just put in Nicholas Mosher. Can't, I don't know if you can see that up there, Nicholas Mosher. And I got 859,000 results. Well, I'm obviously not going to check all that out. And I got things like Facebook, and I got LinkedIn, and I got the wrong Nicholas Mosher, and I got pictures of somebody in Pacific Grove. I mean, I didn't get the Nicholas Mosher I wanted, potentially, but I did not. Okay, so then I put it in quotes, Nicholas Mosher, quotation marks, and I got it down to 3,800. I'm still getting Facebook and LinkedIn. Now I'm putting family history, and I've got it down another 1,000. And my Mosher was 1,600, so I'm hitting the mark here. But when I put in the dates, every one of those is useful. Every one of those is his family. Generally, when you do a Google search, the first 2 pages are about all you'd look at anyway, but this really zeroes in. These are all useful. This is exactly my Nicholas. So try some of those tips, not only with genealogy, but when you're searching for other things as well. And as a result, not Nicholas Mosher, but because I was looking for Samuel Reed Monroe down here, I connected with a cousin who had a blog, which she calls These Are My People. She keeps this up. She's got a little bit about all of her family members. And Samuel Reed Monroe came up, and I was connected with her blog, and I wrote her and have had a really nice correspondence with her. And here she's done a lot of research on Samuel Reed Monroe. So that was from a Google search. So give Google a chance. There are some great things. People are putting up their websites, they're putting up their blogging, and it's all there. I also want to remind you about Google Books. Google has been digitizing books now for quite a few years, hundreds of thousands of books, and many of them are family history books. So if you go to this little grid up here, which you probably all know about, which has the maps and our Gmail and all that, and you go down to books, which is right here, and you enter your person with their dates, I found 3 Mosher books. Now they're not full text. Often they are full text. These are snippet, but still there's some interesting things here. And then I might want to try and get these out of the library because there'll be other connections in these books. So try Google Books, play with that. And lastly, as far as Google, alerts. These alerts are so great. You can put in one of these search things that you have done, that is the name in quotes with the year's family history, and they will let you know when something comes up on the internet that relates to that search. So you put in your search on Thursday, a month later, someone else has posted a website, maybe their family tree or a blog, and Google will let you know that that's available. So use Google Alerts. Just Google Alerts, and you can set up that. That's a really good system too. So you've got Google working for you and searching to see if something new comes up. Okay. But Google does not search databases. It does not pick up searches within most databases. So use Google, get what you can out of it, and then move on to the databases. The library databases, the subscription databases like Ancestry, etc. And then those databases that are free and out there that have wonderful sources. Library of Congress, play around with that. That is a great one. National Archives are all the government documents, the Homestead Act, military, immigration. This is an amazing site. University sites and newspaper sites. And that's the invisible web. Google cannot get into those. You have to go directly to them. Okay, so let's look at the subscriptions. Ancestry does cost money, but there is a free library edition at local libraries. Now, our local libraries here, the Monterey Public Library, the Monterey County Free Library, Carmel Library, all have ancestry. I don't think Pacific Grove does. They all have ancestry. And ancestry now, right now, if you have a library card at one of those libraries, you actually have access to ancestry at home. They've made this available during the pandemic so that you can go on the library's website and actually access the library edition. So that is really great. And if you're an ARP member, there is a discount for ancestry. So you can, and there's a 14-day trial too. Your own subscription has personal information, but the library edition has all the documents. Find My Past is free at the Family History Center. I'll talk a little bit about those later. Find My Past is the British Isles. Also costs money, but you can access it at the Family History Center. It's Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, India, some of Canada, countries that have been colonies of Britain, and it is a very fine site and wonderful newspapers. So that is a good site. My Heritage is an Israeli site. It also costs money, but if you're looking for European documents, it is a good one. And if you're looking to connect with European cousins, it's a very good one. It's an up and coming. It's now has DNA, and it's quite a site actually. And that's free at the Family History Center. Family Search is free. Family Search is a great place to start. It is familysearch.org. It is published or put out by the Latter-day Saints Church. And many of you may know that that is a faith that believes in honoring your ancestors and doing work to honor them. And those of us that are not of that faith have really benefited from this organization. In fact, Roots Tech is put on by the Family Search. It is totally free. It is every bit as thorough and complete as Ancestry or any of these other subscription sites. All you do is need to sign up, have access to it. They don't bother you through your email, but they use that for keeping track of contacts with and letting the hits. They get the hits to the companies that they have scanned their documents, and they let them know how they're being used. But this, I'll talk more about Family Search. Heritage Quest is free at the Monterey Public Library. That is the fifth one. It's a little site, but it's a good place to start, and it's free. So if you're just getting into this, I would look at Family Search, check out Heritage Quest, and take advantage of Ancestry because it's free right now at the library. And if you don't have a library card, you can actually get one online, an e-card, but you can have access to the databases. So those are the big four, the ones that are used.
And Kathy, may I interrupt that on the last slide, you had mentioned the My Heritage, Find My Past. We had a number of people ask about finding, tracing ancestors out of the country. So Wales came up, Eastern Europe, Portugal, Italy.
My Heritage is a good place to go for this because it is international. And when you look at their DNA results, the DNA is largely from Europe, whereas Ancestry is largely Americans who have used it for their DNA analysis. Find My Past is the best one for anyone who has English, Scottish, Wales, Australian. That is definitely the one to go. But if you're looking for, My Heritage has done a lot with the Holocaust, Eastern European countries, Scandinavians definitely use My Heritage. So that is one it's worth it to invest in. Yes, I hope that answers questions. Okay, I wish I had time to show all of you, but all of these, but I'm going to just pick two, well, actually three. We're going to start with Ancestry. What we're looking for are records that track migration and the growth of the size of families, and records that give us clues to dates, names, and locations. Now, once we have that, then the historian in us comes out, and we start to look at the historical context. And we start to see why our ancestors made the decisions they did. By looking at the history of the place and the time, we can see that there was a fire in a town or an epidemic or a drought. And this may be reasons why our ancestors moved on. So first we get the dates. The genealogy is tracking the names, dates, and locations, but we put that in the context of history to develop the story. It's almost like a hanger. The pedigree chart is a hanger, and then we add the story to that hanger by researching the historical background. Location's critical because there may be a lot of John Smiths that we're finding. Location and time lets us move in and see which is our John Smith. So all records are very much connected to the location. This is a Connecticut river, and it's a beautiful part of Connecticut. My Swedish family came to Connecticut, to Higganum, where there was an iron foundry, which they were iron molders, so they were able to work in this factory there. Okay, so let's look at ancestry. We'll do it quickly. A lot of you may be familiar, but just maybe I might be able to share something that you haven't noticed yet. This is the way a personal page looks. Your library page would not have this because it's my Monroe family tree and what I've been looking at, my recent activity and what is going on with my viewing. But down below is the search down here. Okay, so if we go up to search, these are all the things that are available. And we could start with all collections, but if we want to move right into the census or vital records or immigration, we can go directly to those. The library ancestry will not have public member trees, and it will not have a member search. But it will have these other things. Okay, so let's go ahead and come up with something. Now my Daniel Monroe, this is my San Francisco great-grandfather. I just put him in. I put his birth year because I did know it, and I put the location. So I do have the name, the years, and I do have a location. And it comes up right away. These are all up at the top, you'll see the family trees, and I can see more trees. Now, part of the tree problem is that Ancestry allows anybody to put up a tree. So there are thousands of trees, and some people cut and paste from other people's trees, and they're having a lot of fun with it. They've had their DNA taken, and they're developing an interest, and they're taking from other people's trees, but they haven't checked on anything. So this is a caution, a word of caution: be careful of ancestry trees. But they are leads, they are tips, and there are thousands of trees. But I did get some vital records. I got a death index. I found out about his death. I have a census, and I do have his voter registration. And I cut this off. There were more down below. If I want to go straight to birth, marriage, and death, or military, I can do that over here. But that's a general search. And generally, you're going to find something. Now, if I want to go into birth, marriage, and death, which is right here, and maybe I'm interested in marriage and divorce, I can do that. That was that side panel on the side. And here I have his marriage record, Ann Arbor in 1867. This is not my Daniel Monroe. So you got to be really careful because these are Michigan, but they're not my Daniel because he was born in Ann Arbor and he was married in Ypsilanti. Okay, so it's very easy. You can get into it and you can just go crazy. And it's very clean and easy to read. But I do want to share a second thing with you about Ancestry. And I don't know if you've all those of you used Ancestry, have used the card catalog. The card catalog is really important in Ancestry. It's kind of like, let me give you an example. You're given an assignment in 5th grade to do a report on Samuel Morse. And your 5th grade teacher says, go to the library and get a book on Samuel Morse. So you go into the library and you talk to the great children's librarian there, and he or she finds you the perfect biography on Samuel Morse. And you're ready to go out the door. And the librarian says, hey, wait a minute, let's look in the card catalog. Remember the old card catalog? And let's look up the Telegraph. and see if we can find any books on the telegraph, how it worked and how it was invented. And you say, okay, all right, all right. So she goes, or he goes, and finds a telegraph book and brings it out and is all excited about it. And you say, well, this is interesting. I'll take that book too. And then the librarian says, well, what about the transatlantic cable? Or what about Morse code? There might be a book on Morse code. Wouldn't you be interested in that? You think, well, yeah, I'll be interested in that. You go in for one book, you walk out with four. That's kind of what the card catalog is all about. And way that works is that you go into the card catalog and you say, okay, I really didn't find the New Jersey marriage that I wanted for my New Jersey relative ancestor. So I'm going to go into the card catalog and see if there are any books on marriage in New Jersey. This may not be indexed in the overall index. You may have to go into this book and look at the index in the book, or you may need to go at the end of the book or the table of contents or whatever. So by going into the card catalog and looking at keywords New Jersey, I found, well, there's something here, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, United Methodist Church. I don't know if they were Methodist or not, but maybe it might be in there. And then, oh, here's New Jersey marriage records, 1670 to 1965. Well, maybe they were Presbyterian. And then the very last one, oh, a marriage index. That might answer my question. So if you don't find it in that first overall search for Samuel Morse, go into the card catalog and look at other ways of getting around it. This is what librarians do all the time. They kind of look at a subject and hit it from other angles. And that's the way Ancestry set up what they call the card catalog. So give that a try if you haven't done it already, because don't stop and say, oh, I did my search, there's nothing there. Dig a little deeper and go into this card catalog. I love this about Ancestry. This is a really great tool.
I have one question. It's not exactly on Ancestry, but just in the obstacles people are encountering in terms of accessing certificates. Are they as readily available as they have been in the past?
That's a really good question. There are some states that are much trickier. Their adoption information is in some states very hard to get a hold of, and some states are asking for all kinds of identification in terms of death certificates if you're not a direct relation. So yes, this is true. There's an organization called Records Reclaimed that is actually going to court over some of these issues. So that is something to follow. And yes, that is a problem. Yes, thank you. Okay, so now another source is the FamilySearch.org. And this is the library in Salt Lake City, the Family History Library. This is the largest genealogy library in the world, 6 to 8 floors, just packed with things. And it is an amazing experience. Their website, which is free, this is more pictures. This is the microfilm. It goes on one floor, one row, right after another. These are the computers, and they're so helpful there. And unfortunately, they're not, it's hard to contact them. Anyway, I better move on because I've got so much to say here. Okay, this catalog to the Family History Library is free. It has 1.4 billion documents representing 100 countries, 7.65 billion searchable names. That is, if you're looking up a name, the largest family tree, because unlike Ancestry, it's one family collaborative tree. It's more, as a result, it's more accurate because your cousins who are also researching a family member keep you honest. They call you on it if they see something wrong. So this is a tree that you can rely on a bit more. There are 500,000 digitized online books. Family Search has teams that go out to archives and libraries capturing 400,000 to 500,000 images per camera per year. They film about 150 million images in 1 year, and they have the potential to film 3 million archival documents in a year. It's an amazing, amazing program. But as a result, they can't keep up with their indexing. So that's where the family history card catalog, just like Ancestry, comes in handy. But they're making a valiant effort, and it's all volunteer. I've actually done some of that and done some indexing for them, and it's an amazing system. It's actually very interesting, the process. A camera icon indicates that microfilm has been digitized and not necessarily indexed. Okay, so this is what their page looks like. I have a family tree up there, and every time I open Family Search, if someone else has put something, they let me know. So Elizabeth Sales is someone that is in my family, and someone has posted that. So they let me know what a month ago they posted that. They let me know. They have the record overall search, just like Ancestry. They have the family tree. They have the catalog. That is their library catalog, like Ancestry. They have digitized books, and they have the research wiki. Okay, so let's look at a few of these things. Just like Ancestry, they have an overall search feature, and you put in your name and date and location. And here I have Nicholas Mosier. I put in his date and his location. And here's what I got up. It's not as clean and easy to read as Ancestry, but nevertheless, the information's there. Now he's 1700s, 1600s. They did bring up information about his death, and they brought up two birth christening programs for his children, which gave me some information. So I got something. I got a hit, 3 hits for that. So then if I move into the family tree part, and here he is with all the information, I see that all of these people have been working on this family tree, and some of them are the same, some of them are different, but they've given their source and what they have. And I can go in and look at any of these sources that other people have posted. You see there's 34 sources up there. 19 people have been collaborating. And as a result, there's a great family tree here of Nicholas and his parents and siblings and his children. Great, it's all very helpful. And there's a timeline. And again, because so many people have worked on this and there are sources for all of this, it's more reliable than Ancestry. But if you're sensitive about being called out for an error that you have, this is a tree that is, you have to be able to be open to discussion. So here someone said, this marriage date is listed as incorrect. I want to talk about it. They have discussions, discrepancy found in the record for children of Nicholas Mosier. They're all kind of, everyone's sort of checking on this and keeping track of it. So this is actually a more intense genealogy group because they are really watching credibility of sources. So it's all interesting. The process is very interesting. And there's only one tree, and that makes it a lot easier, and you can rely on it a bit more. Somebody has posted a book here under memories, put it up, and here's Mosier family, and that's really helpful. They scanned it and put it up. Here's the catalog, same thing with Ancestry, works the same way. I was putting in Westerly, and then they had a scroll down bar of about 5 choices, and I picked the Rhode Island one. And then they came up with things that I could search, just as my Mosier telegraph, my Samuel Morse telegraph analogy, same thing. They've come up with other options for me if I'm researching Westerly, Rhode Island. If I want to put in Mosier in the family catalog, they brought up some Mosier books, but these would not have come up necessarily if I did the overall all collection search. I had to go into the catalog to get some of these. Here it is. Some of these are digitized, some are not. Some you can actually see at home, others you have to go to the Family History Center. Okay, so that's Family Search. There are family history books. I put in Westfield, New Jersey, and they told me to check these various libraries that there are family books on, there are books about Westfield. That would be for my historical context that I talked about earlier. And here's a book, Inscriptions from the Cemetery of the Presbyterian Church at Westfield. And it's here. It's totally, they've scanned it. It's totally here. Now, this is particularly interesting to me because I have been to this cemetery. And if you've been to cemeteries, you'll know that the marble starts to fade over time and it's hard to read the inscriptions. Books like this, the books like, well, here I am again, getting myself mixed up. Books like this are really helpful because the epitaphs and the dates are going to be in this book. So you can check it against, you know, your visit to the cemetery, as I did. Now, the research wiki. This is the coup de grace of family search. This is something that is so helpful. If any of you attended the Ancestor Roundup and heard Karen Clifford speak, she talked about the research wiki. Again, notice how my front page has changed because another picture was popped up. It's constantly changing. Whoever's adding, they're letting me know if something else has been added. Okay, the wiki. It's like the Wikipedia, actually. And I can put in an ancestor's name or place. These are my Swedish great-grandparents who came to America from Finneruja, from this little church. And I put in Finneruja. This is a little parish, maybe 100, 200 people live in this area. There is actually a page here in the wiki. I was preparing for my trip to Sweden. I wanted to see what they had. They had a list of all of the farms in Sweden. These are two of my family's farms. And if you see over here, they have kind of the changes in names of that parish. This is all in family search. But the thing that was, this is where my great-grandmother was born when I visited, probably very similar except for the asphalt road. They told me about census, how to go into the Sweden examination records, the church records, which are fabulous. And then this was the thing that did it for me. Genealogical Societies in Narki, Sweden. And I wrote to the Finneruja Genealogical Society. There's my cousins. And I wrote to Ubero, where my family was. And they said, great, when you come, we'll take you to the farms. And not only that, they found my cousins. These are the descendants of my great-grandmother's older sister, who's still in Sweden. And this lovely lady who's standing next to me had been doing her own research. And she said, I knew there were 3 siblings in America, but I had no way of knowing how to get in touch with any of you. And when I heard from the Genealogy Society that you were searching for me, I was so excited. And they invited us to a dinner, and it was amazing. And she did not speak English, but her grandsons did, and her daughter and her daughter's husband. So it was an amazing experience, and I owe that to Family Search. So check out the wiki. Okay, now the Family History Center. These are ours is over in Noche, Buena, and Plumas in Seaside. All these databases are free. Now these are small satellite centers with the Family History Library, the Family Search Organization, and they're connected with the Latter-day Church. This Family History Center is in the Latter-day LDS Church, and it is run by volunteers from the church and volunteers from the Monterey County Genealogy Society. So they have let the Genealogy Society meet there and use its resources, and they in turn are volunteers. This Family History Center has all of these databases for free. And when it's open again, it's closed now, please go over there and check it out. And they're wonderful volunteers. So this is a way to have access to these subscription sites free. ArchiDigital is a Swedish database. Find My Past, you know, Fold 3 is military. And as you get into this more, you'll learn Genealogy Bank is newspapers. And so anyway, those are over there at the Family History Center. Now, another great library is the Monterey Public Library, and I want to just quickly share with you the resources here, the California History Room, and genealogy links. Any public library in a city where your family lived very likely has genealogy links or local history links. They may even have digitized a newspaper. The Monterey Library has digitized the Monterey newspaper since 1846 up to 1959. Check out the public library where your family is. And I also wanted to note here that Ancestry, there's Heritage Quest, and there's also U.S. History and Context. And here's the historical newspapers. Here's Heritage Quest, which is another good one. Very easy, clean lines, great for the census, great for directories, free at the library. If you have a library card, you can do it at home. You can use this at home. So this is a good starting place too. So Social Security, Freedmen's Bureau, cemeteries, all here. I put in Daniel Monroe. My question, when did he come to San Francisco? This is a directory of 1868, and here he is at 606 Washington. That answers my question. In 1868, he was indeed in San Francisco. Federal Census, 1870, he was in San Francisco, and he has a young child born. His first child died. This is the second child. That first child was born in 1868. This is the second child, and there he is. And that's all from Heritage Quest. Here's the census. Census is a good way to track your family, a good place to start. So if you're just getting started and you don't know where to start with the census. List the head of the household, age and sex. Lists everyone in the household, 1850 to 1870, birthplace, age. You can see how the family grows, and you can see how they move. And here, 1880 to 1840, lists everyone in the household, birthplace, education, ability to read, write, occupation. And also, I believe the 1920 or 31 lists the radio. If you had a radio, it talks about mortgage or whether you're renting, gives you so much information about families. So census are a good place to start. Check out your collateral family. That's the aunts, uncles, siblings. And make a note of the surnames that your family married into, because these are the names that will be in the cemetery right by your family. Now, I wanted to show you this because my great-grandfather, my Swedish great-grandfather, has all of these people that are part of the family. I'm over here, William Fritz. I'm in this line. But all of these aunts and uncles, these are the ones that married, two families married, have tons of kids. So I have probably 21st cousins to begin with, double cousins even. They all know stories of our joint great-grandfather. I have stories. It's important that we are in communication to share those stories. So these collateral family members who are not your direct line, that's the aunts and uncles and the children of the aunts and uncles, have the stories. So it's really important to track them as well as you get into this more. And they'll be the ones turning up. Those children will be the ones turning up on your DNA results too. Cluster research are the friends and neighbors. And they're going to keep popping up in the cemetery and the church congregations. They're on the legal documents. And these are called the fan club. Cluster research. They may not be your blood relatives, but they were probably on the ship coming over from Europe. And they probably are in the town going to the same church that your ancestors are in. And you want to follow them. So here again are my great-grandparents. I've looked at this wedding certificate so many times, and went back to it after a couple of years, and I looked at Arthur Snow and Maddie Snow, see down there in the witnesses, and I thought, whoa, I had no idea they were witnesses because that's who he started his law firm with. So I started in San Francisco. So I started to look for Arthur Snow. He went to the same law school as Daniel. They were friends at law school. He was his witness at his marriage, and the law firm was Snow, Monroe, and Field. So there it is. These keep coming up. Enoch Larson, another family member that keeps coming up. Enoch Larson is the brother of the second husband of the daughter of my great uncle. And you think, oh my goodness, why? What? Enoch Larson had property next to my great grandparents. He was a friend. He was part of the family. These are the things. These are the These are the connections that you want to keep track of as you get more into this. Crowdsourcing. Write people. Ask people for information. That's the process of enlisting the services via the internet. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples of great things that I had through crowdsourcing. Ingela is a docent over at the Swedish Immigration Museum in Gothenburg. And I knew that she had written essays on Swedish immigration. And I wondered how my family got from Finneroja to Gothenburg to get the feeder ship to go down to Hull in England. I wondered how all this happened. And I said, can you tell me what happened? And she wrote back to me and she said, there was a railroad between Stockholm and Gothenburg, and it went right through Finneroja. And when I was over there, I was on that train and we went right through Finneroja. I came back, but I was on my way to another city. And that was pretty exciting to be on those railroad tracks. So they've saved money to get on that train, to get to the harbor, to get the steamship. And that was some information. I've put together a book on this family, and I will talk more about that in later. But that was very interesting. And then I also wrote to the Trail Historical Society and said, take advantage of all these sources, get your letters out there. I was interested in this historical society. I wanted to know, what did they know about Peter Anderson and Carl Sandgren? And they wrote me back. So Facebook's a great way to contact these organizations. There's a Swedish American genealogy group. There's genealogy groups for all of the ethnicities. So look at those. These people translate. A lot of Swedes are on these Facebook, and they will translate for you. Okay, you've exhausted your online resources. Now what? Now you've got to do it like our grandparents did it. You've got to do genealogy by corresponding directly or going to the libraries, the museums, the cemeteries, the societies, historical societies. Or you got to plan a genealogy road trip, which are lots of fun. So first go through all of your online resources. Now we've got to do what our parents and our great-grandparents did, directly correspond. They didn't have the online resources that we have. So the library resources are there, but they're not always digitized. And by census, the census is digitized, but state censuses are not always digitized. Directories are not always digitized, and voter registration. In fact, I went over to the Monterey County Historical Society, Baranda in Salinas, because I was really interested in voter registration for my Monterey people. And that's not online. I had to go into the big registration books, which was a thrill to do that. The California History Room at the Monterey Public Library has directories for Monterey County that are not, going back to the turn of the century, that are not digitized. So sometimes you just need to write the library. Newspapers and periodicals might be indexed online. Go to the public library of the city where your family was from and see if that newspaper's digitized. But if it's not, write the librarian and tell them, ask them what you want, and they will look for you. They will scan it and send it to you. That's what we do. That's what we love to do. So give it a try. I've asked for a lot of obituaries that way for I've known the date that the person died, and the librarians have gone in and scanned the obituaries for me. Okay, obituaries, maps. I will say that the Carmel Library has the Sanborn maps, and Jean Chapin showed me those. The Sanborn maps are amazing. So those are things that you can find at the library. Photos, clipping file, and local secondary sources, the mug books, the centennial books. The mug books are like the 1890s version of Who's Who, where you pay to have a biographical sketch in a book. Those are really interesting. And many towns did centennial books where they interviewed old timers who told stories about the town 150 years ago. Those are really interesting. These are secondary sources, but they certainly give flavor to your research. Okay, so here's the California History Room, part of it. It's upstairs in the Monterey Public Library. But those files on the upper right are our vertical, thousands of vertical files, hundreds of vertical files, thousands of documents. They're not digitized, and hopefully someday they will be. But we get, or, I'm not working there now with the library being closed, but the library gets emails, people asking information, and we scan those documents and send it to them. So that's a free service libraries do. Librarians love to do this kind of thing. And Carmel has a wonderful local history library. Monterey County Free Library has many resources and wonderful digitized photos online. Our local libraries, if you have local people, are there ready to help you and are very anxious to do that. But these are not digitized. The lower right corner is an Ontario library. When I went up to see my Loyalist family, and they opened it, it was closed, and I had written before, and they opened it specially for me. And those were not things that have been digitized. So sometimes you need to go there or at least write the library. Okay, so here's my North Dakota trip. I wrote the librarian and I said, where can I find things about my Swedish family? And she wrote back and she said, it's located, Grand Forks is located 20 miles north of Buxton. She's in Grand Forks. There's no Swedish museum, but she gave me some sources. The Grand Forks Public Library does have the newspaper and microfilm. She told me to contact Trail County Historical Society, which I did through Facebook. And she told me about the Myra Museum. So I thought, this is a really nice librarian. I'm going to go a step further here. So I said, "Dear Diane, thank you for your very helpful and very quick response. I'm going to follow up on your suggestions." I had gone into the catalog of the Grand Forks Library, and there were two books that I was just really itching to get my hands on. And I knew that to go up to Grand Forks would be another half day. And I wanted to spend my time in Buxton, which is the town where my family went. And I thought, if she could just pull those books off the shelf and then let me know if there's anything in there, that would save me some time. And I said, "Here are my family members," gave her the information. And she got back to me and she said, "I looked through the Buxton Centennial book and found two places where the Sangre name is mentioned," which she scanned for me and attached them. And she didn't find anything in the other book. But what she found, among other things, was this little gem. Again, this is, a secondary source and maybe a little hyperbole, but a neighbor, Mr. Sangren, who was my great uncle, told of having gone on skis to Fargo. Now, this is a time when, excuse me, sorry. I was just trying to read this here because I've got my, okay. This is gone on skis to Fargo for a badly needed sack of flour, which he carried home on his back. This was a 120-mile round trip, but the pioneer spirit was strong, and so was his back, and it had to be done. And this was in the Centennial book. Now, that's a little over the top. It is indeed 60 miles up to Fargo from Buxton. So it would have been a 120-mile trip. But I love this story, and I love the fact that maybe, in fact, he did do this in some way, and maybe he stopped at houses along the way. I don't know. But this is a gem that the librarian sent me. So these are the kinds of things that we have to go to enjoy, and road trips are one way to hit the museums, hit the libraries, and the wonderful places that our family has been. This is a picture of me in Dolstorp in Sweden, where my other great-grandparents, who were iron molders, worked in a factory. And to see the little stone houses where they would have lived, and to see the remnants of this factory were amazing. In the rain, it was very moving. The upper corner is my brother and myself on the land in North Dakota that was purchased through the Homestead Act of my Anders Petter. And the bottom is a picture of a Santa Cruz house where other Swedish ancestors came to settle in Santa Cruz. Okay, so this week, if you have time, I'd love to hear and love to hear what you find next week. Select an individual or a family to do some research and check out some of these online sites: Family Search, Ancestry, Heritage Quest. Gather the information that you already have. Check out these websites and begin to put together a family tree if you can. And again, start with one question, expand it to others, sort of, you're almost a journalist: who, what, when, where, and why. Gather your information, find some answers, look at your sources, look at the secondary and the other sources, and share your findings. And hopefully, maybe we'll hear about those next week. And I will make sure that Michelle has this, so that if you do not have a family tree, you can use this. And next week, this is what we're going to do. We're going to tackle organization, and we're going to look at online trees, the pros and cons, and whether or not to do or not to do, to be or not to be, whether you want to use online trees or not. And we're going to look at that and talk about that, how that works. We're going to talk about software, which is another option to keep track of all your information. We're going to talk about what to do with those paper documents, the binders, the folders. What are we going to do about them? How are we going to organize them? We're going to talk about how to organize. We've got a lot next week going on. Digitize records. What are we going to do with our computer folders? And how do we keep that separate from our software? Photos. What are we going to do with our photos? Now, photos can go into the software. They can go into the online trees, but we probably want another source on our computers for those photos as well. Email. You know, I shared with you some of the emails that I exchanged. Email from cousins you want to keep, because those are source materials, and you want to keep those in a systematic organizational system as well. And then I'm going to share with you a software that I use called Evernote. I don't know if any of you have used this. I love Evernote. It's organized not only my genealogy, but my life. I keep recipes and travel plans and lists that I write, to-do lists, but I keep my genealogy on Evernote. And this is a good way to deal with the rabbit holes, the things that you're not quite getting into yet, but you don't want to lose what you found. So that's next week. And this is my week to speak. So if any of you are interested in connecting with cousins, reunions, road trips, and Zoom, I'm giving a talk for the Monterey County Genealogy Society on Thursday, March 4th at 7 p.m. And I'm going to talk about planning a reunion, planning a road trip. And if that's not meant to be this year, it certainly wasn't last year, then how can we create a virtual reunion? This is a picture of my husband's New Zealand family. We were there March 12th, and you can all remember what March 12th was all about. We were on our way to Australia. We had just had this wonderful reunion with all of these delightful cousins. We were headed for the New Zealand branch of the family. And my daughter said, are you sure you want to go on to New Zealand? Given that the pandemic was already starting up. So we didn't make it to Australia, but we had a great time in New Zealand. And I want to share some of the reunion tips if you are looking at organizing any of this, or a road trip. So that's Thursday night. And if you have questions during the week, write me. I am happy to answer you. I will get back to you. And questions that you'd like me to even answer next week is before we start our second session. I really welcome your questions. So please write me. If you are interested in seeing the talk that I'm going to give Thursday night, send me an email and I'll make sure you have the link. So let's see, we've got a few minutes for more questions. I'm going to stop my share and be back.
Great. A little tip from Jill about Tracing the Tribe, a site on Facebook for people of Jewish background. So thank you, Jill.
Oh, great.
The last comment is more of a heads up that the census records often have misspellings.
Yes, thank you. And name variations. so that sometimes when they're indexed, they're hard to find because they're not picking up the mistake. And sometimes it's the first letter that's a mistake. So you're really off. There is a way of looking for census entries. Steve Morse has a website that you go into, enumeration districts, and you can locate the area where your ancestors would have lived, and you can go through the census and find them there and see, even if it's misspelled, you can find it that way. So Steve Morse is a very good tip on that. If you do find a mistake in the indexing, go to another website. There may be a mistake in Ancestry, but Family Search may have it right.